The other thing that's all right there. Did you read that? Every single one. I was gonna say, you're my hero. That's what I told him, yeah. That's cheers. I don't think so. I read the executive summary, which is still like 50 pages.
Sound of music.
Yep. Did you go to it?
It was really, I mean,
Were the hills alive?
okay, we're gonna go. Suggested that we like electric and water, for example, there were a couple of different funds, and we had split out the capital fund and the O&M fund that we just rolled out all of these ones, and you just see the one line item for each department. So if that's preferred, we'll continue with that. If you'd like to see the breakout.
It's me being picky, but I prefer the old way.
Okay.
But I'll defer to you guys.
You're the
I
financial
like
guy.
seeing the split between operating and capital. But what was your reason?
Yeah, we have, as we're making capital assets, and I mean, the cash between the one in total is correct, but we, in one case got to $1 million negative and $1 million positive, and that's, depreciation, operational expense versus capital, and, how Robert classified some of those compared to we do, how we have.
Might just note on the report.
Okay.
Any other conversation, question, or discussion? We can talk about water first. What's that? Any comments on the electric report? Irp. Admin. Move on to the minutes from last board meeting. Any conversation or discussion related to those?
Motion to approve the consent agenda items.
Second.
Awesome. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Okay. The next agenda topic is the electric utility items. We have a resolution to dissolve Fund 625
and return the remaining amount to Fund 630. Chris Longer, I'm gonna talk to you about.
I think we mentioned a couple meetings ago, there was one fund that was kind of sitting out there with that, those monies in there, and it had been established for like economic development reasons. We need to go about resolving that, so that's what this one is doing. It's not a required separate fund that we need to have, so that and just rolling it back into the.
I did find your trail interesting from a history standpoint.
I did too.
I was at 2004 when that was initially.
2001.
2001. So it's been there for quite a while and
Yes.
not leveraged.
It's gone now. So it's gone.
So Chris, it was like 114,000, is that what was in there?
That's correct.
And when you look back through the history, did that get just added over time, or how did? Because it looked like there was only, what, 14 or 15,000 that got added the first year.
Yes, and I wasn't able to go back and see from year to year, like what amounts were added each year. I just know that, you know, it hadn't changed in quite a few years. It's always been out around that $100K. So there's nothing added to it. And I would probably have to dig a little deeper, maybe with Jeff's help with the Excel system to see, you know, how that either trended or, you know, there were some years that were way.
And was there any usage of the funds, money that went out of the fund?
Not that I could see.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Wasn't that the deal where Jerry and Todd, they started some, I can't even remember
I
now.
think it was annual development.
Yeah.
And then there, it had more.
And people-
Several different things
Yeah.
over the years.
And there were
so,
different
yeah.
organizations or something that donated or whatever
And
to it.
I think this was after that, like after that sort of resolved itself. And IMU got some money back, because I know I was at Simpson at the time and Simpson got money back.
Oh,
I think that's part of what they put into this fund.
yeah.
And that's part of the reason why I think it's a bad idea for us to do that. Do what? So as near as I can tell, that money, based on what I saw there, was really kind of for economic development purposes. And our take as a board has been, and we've been advised by actually council that said our job is not economic development, that's the city's job. And so I say that, for instance, you know, if we have this pot of money to use for development, and if the city decides that they're not going to do something and we think it's a great idea, contrary to what the city thinks, I don't know that it's wise for us to say, oh yeah, here's a bunch of money to go ahead with that. So I think we're kind of better off staying on the course that we are, let the city be in the development business, and our job is to keep the lights and water on.
I agree.
So I need a motion to move forward with the resolution dissolving the Fund 625 and returning the remaining amount to Fund 630.
Second.
Jackie, would you take roll call, please?
Board Member Smith,
Yes.
Rosga,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes.
White.
Yes.
The next item on the agenda is the electric utility informational items. We're going to discuss the means draft of the 22 integrated resource plan. Chris, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, so over the past couple of years, Mean's been working on this required document. It's not required in our transmission area. It's required in one of the other ones, but it does provide some good background and some good information about what Mean looks at and what they're evaluating. And kind of a little bit of what the future holds as far as some decisions that need to be made in the future, you know, as well as where we need to concentrate, most specifically where we need to concentrate our efforts. Like for instance, when contracts roll off, that shows a gap between what our portfolio can put out and our needs. And that's, you know, it was good exercise, and it's there's been 17 meetings where this has been discussed, so it's over 2 years worth of work, kind of culminating with this draft document.
Can you talk a little bit about who participates in the creation of this?
So a lot of it is driven by Mean, and maybe I'll let Shannon have some of the specifics. They do a lot of the legwork and the development work, and it's at the direction of the Mean Board of Directors. So we do have, some influence as to the direction, but it is it is a collective plan with input from all of the communities. And, like I said, of the 59 communities that are participating, we have a 159th vote in how this goes. And so it is a broad, multi-community, multi-state document where they're really kind of, it's like I said, it's required from the WAPA Western Area Power Association. It's not a MISO. We're in MISO, but they cover, since Mean has some transmission agreements between the two and can move electric resources between the various entities, kind of high level. They take that collective organizational approach, and it has been enlightening to look and see what Shannon and the group from Mean looks at on a daily basis, and the markets and all the other factors that are involved in making sure we've got power supplied 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Would you like to introduce Shannon?
Yeah, and so I don't see Shannon should be logged in.
Yep, I'm on. Do you want me to go ahead and share my screen now or wait?
Yeah, it's Shannon. So Shannon's got a Shannon. Why don't you go ahead and share your screen?
What's Shannon's last name?
Shannon Coleman. She is Shannon. What is your specific title?
Sure. I'm the supervisor of resource planning and analysis at Mean. And tell me, it tells me that I'm sharing my screen, but let me know if you see it or not.
Yep, we can see it.
Oh, excellent. And is it the titles page that says 2022 Integrated Resource Plan?
Yes.
Excellent. Do you want me to dive right in, Chris, or did you want any more introduction?
Yeah, unless you think I missed something, want to kind of any other introduction? Otherwise, jump right in.
Great. Okay, good evening, and thank you for inviting us to present some information on our integrated resource plan. I'll try not to take up too much of your time in the meeting because I know you have some other items on the agenda. So I have quite a few slides, but I'll try to be brief on each one. I first want to start off with a brief description of who Mean is and how Mean's structured. I'm sure Chris has given you this information in the past, so we'll just kind of touch on it briefly here. Mean's a joint action agency whose purpose is to provide wholesale power supply to our member communities. As a public power entity, as you well know, we are a not-for-profit. Mean has no investors, no shareholders, and all of our costs must be recovered by Mean members in our rates. Mean is structured such that each member community has a representative and an alternate, and those individuals conduct the business of Mean. Each member of Mean has an equal vote. Mean members, not Mean staff, make all of our resource acquisition decisions. Mean does face some significant limitations in terms of our resource portfolio. Mean has several long-term resource contracts that spell out the terms of various ownership or power purchase arrangements. Unlike many larger utilities, Mean only has a minority ownership in all of the fossil fuel plants in its portfolio. And as is typical, our voice in the control of those units is proportional to our ownership percentage. Therefore, Mean has little control over the decisions made concerning the operating life or the retirement of any of our coal units. Even if we wanted to close them tomorrow, we wouldn't be able to make that decision ourselves. As you would expect, our resource contracts require Mean to pay the cost of the resource for the term of the contract. Some of the terms are a set number of years, and some extend for the operating life of the unit. Some of the contracts charge cost as a set dollars per megawatt hour of generation, and other contracts require Mean to pay all of the actual costs incurred by that resource. The contracts also state that Mean either must take delivery of the power proportional to its contract and pay the associated costs, or must still at least pay a portion of the cost, even if not taking delivery of the energy. That means that the most economical resource option is for Mean to take energy that we're already paying for. The other option would be to continue paying for these resources, but add resources to replace the generation with something cleaner. In that case, Mean members would see some notable increases in power costs, as Mean would be essentially paying double for some of our energy generation. And in addition to this, if we were to attempt to not take delivery of energy as required by contract, we would likely face penalties for breach of contract. In the resource projections shown throughout the IRP, actual contract amounts are shown, and generation is based on recent historical generation. There is, of course, a possibility that some coal plants might be retired for a variety of reasons. And when we learn of those decisions by the majority owners and operators, we will reflect those end dates in our projections, but we really want to show actual data rather than a wish list of possibilities. Currently, none of the coal resources in our portfolio have announced any planned closure dates. So these limitations are a really important factor when you consider Mean's future resource plans. The IRP report contains the resource mix for Mean and for each region in terms of the nameplate capacity in our portfolio and the available energy at a few specific points in the future. This slide shows this information for the entire Mean portfolio with nameplate capacity on the left and available energy on the right. And the reason that we are titling it available energy is that market dynamics determine how many of our resources are dispatched, and market dynamics are influenced by many variables. The energy shown on the graphs is based on historical generation and the expectation of each resource's availability, also their outage schedules and the status quo market conditions. Particularly as more renewables are integrated into SPP and into MISO, we expect that fossil fuel units will be dispatched less, which obviously would change the percentages on the graphs you see throughout the report. The graphs were created primarily to show our future needs for resources. And as I just explained a couple of slides ago, all of the future data shown indicates the current term of our contracts without speculating as to early termination or external factors that might result in lower levels of generation. So that's what you see throughout the report in these graphs shown. For 2022, we expect both capacity and energy to be just over 50% fossil fueled and just under 50% supplied by non-carbon resources. This compares pretty closely with the actuals for the last available fiscal year, which came to just under 50% fossil fueled and just over 50% on non-carbon in terms of capacity and energy. And again, that difference speaks to the available energy versus the dispatched energy. These graphs show how dispatched energy from coal units can differ from available energy due to market conditions. On the graph on the left, you can see two occurrences. First, in the pink section is the obvious factor, the retirement of coal resources, which we know is accelerating in all regions. However, there's another factor as well. Coal resources are being dispatched at lower rates year over year. Specifically, as more renewable generation is integrated into the market, the marginal price of energy decreases. And when that marginal price is lower than the coal plant's actual cost to generate, the market typically doesn't dispatch the resource. And we've seen this with Mean's coal resources in both SPP and in MISO. The graph on the right shows Mean's resources and the capacity factor year over year. That's the ratio of actual generation to the generation you would get from operating that unit at full capacity every hour of the year. And since 2011, you can see that Mean's coal resources have operated less and less. This is a value that we're keeping an eye on, watching year over year to see how that trend is going. And each year's projection of energy will take this into account as we watch changes in the market and utilization of those units. So again, the values shown for available energy are conservative in this respect, and we might actually see lower energy values in future years. Mean has a renewable distributed generation policy that allows all Mean communities to self-supply up to 5% of their annual energy needs using a locally sited renewable resource. In late 2019, Mean completed a business case for the creation of an aggregated solar request for proposals, as you well know, which combined several Mean communities to collectively purchase solar resources to be installed in their own towns at a lower price than any of those communities could acquire with a single project. The RFP was rather successful and so far has resulted in proposed PPAs for over 27 megawatts of community solar. Here's the table showing all of the communities and the sizing there. Right now, solar is the most popular installation, but we also have had discussions with members about other technologies and how they would qualify under this policy. And another take on distributed generation that demonstrates the benefits of a joint action agency is the possibility of communities collaborating to make it easier for all communities to take advantage of DG. Some of our communities are geographically limited in a way that makes the installation of a large solar field virtually impossible and highly ineffective. We've discussed the possibility of those towns purchasing a distributed generation resource to be located in another town. This is yet another way to get that full 5% for all of our members to take advantage of. And again, the future installation of DG has a potential to reduce the need for Mean-owned resources. So we're keeping a close eye on this progress and how it impacts our future resource needs. Mean also looked in the IRP at future demand side management programs as a way to decrease or control demand and energy consumption on the load side. Some of these programs will allow me to procure fewer future resources, and others will allow us to more efficiently use our supply side resources. We plan to continue the current slate of our commercial and residential energy efficiency programs that we administer. And of course, communities will continue to offer the programs that show savings for their communities. We also plan to continue efforts on energy efficiency education, coordinating with some other entities. The actual savings from all these programs are spelled out in tables in the report, so you can see that. As for new future programs, we are planning to present to the Services Committee a program for residential electric vehicle charger incentives. This will be coming to the committee soon with some analysis. And this, of course, is one of those programs that doesn't reduce the need for future resources, but does allow Mean communities the potential to more efficiently use resources. You may be familiar with the AMI, or Advanced Metering Infrastructure Initiative. We now have 15 communities that have signed a letter of intent, which represents about 9,000 meters. AMI has a great potential to increase the value of the demand side management programs that we administer now and into the future, and enhance any potential savings of those programs. And lastly, we've had several discussions with member communities about the possibilities surrounding battery storage as a demand side management tool. This is still in the exploration phase as we study what those impacts could be and applications for where that could be used. With the results of a cost benefit analysis in the IRP and the status of these future projects, no new demand side management measures were calculated into the modeling, but all of our existing DSM programs and planned DSM programs are already incorporated into our load forecasting. In the IRP report, you'll see the load and capability projections for Mean as a whole, as well as projections for each region, because that's how we procure our resources and how we serve load. These graphs in the report show our forecasted load for the next 15 years and the capacity and energy of each resource in the portfolio, taking into account the expiration of several resource contracts within that 15-year time frame. And that's what Chris was kind of alluding to, the matchup of load and resources and where we see those gaps. Those 15-year projections show when we'll need additional resources and the magnitude of those future resource needs. These graphs here on this slide summarize the capacity and energy needs for each year in each region. In SPP, there's a capacity need of about 55 megawatts from 2024 to 2028, and a growing need for energy throughout the entire 15 years. In the West, we see a small capacity deficit, about 10 megawatts from 2024 to 2028, and then a larger capacity need of 45 to 60 megawatts for the remaining years, and an energy need that grows throughout the study period. You only see a small sliver of future capacity needs for MISO. MISO is largely resource adequate into the future. These graphs show what we need our future resources to supply, and this is the basis of the sizing for our future resource portfolio options. In January of 2020, the Mean Board approved the 2050 vision with a goal to achieve a carbon neutral resource portfolio by the year 2050. Obviously, to get to this point, resource planning must only consider resources that realize and maintain a lower level of carbon emissions over time. That started with phase 1 of the IRP and the criteria used in that evaluation, which included emissions, the risk of future environmental legislation, and adherence to the 2050 vision. And I'll talk about that analysis in a couple slides here. We also needed to make sure that the portfolio modeling gave us results that somehow assigned a value to emissions reduction, or conversely, a cost to those emissions. In the portfolio modeling, we used 9 different market pricing scenarios that varied the system load, the natural gas pricing projection, and the application of a carbon tax. And looking at those modeling scenarios on the lower right, you can see that there are some pairings that hold other variables constant while varying the level of carbon tax. So if we compare scenario 7, which uses the high natural gas future and adds a carbon limit, it utilizes a system of allowances and penalties for non-compliance that are applied as a carbon tax. So if we compare the results of scenario 7 to those of scenario 4, we can see the measurement of the sensitivity to carbon tax. Then again, if you look at scenario 8, it uses the low natural gas future and a similar system of carbon allowances and carbon taxes. So if we compare scenario 8 to scenario 5, that also indicates how the scenarios are, how the portfolios respond based on a cost of carbon. And then lastly, scenario 9 applies a consistent escalating carbon tax on all emissions for the entire study period. Comparing this to the reference case of scenario 1 allows us to see how each of those portfolios will react to a carbon tax and the risk that's involved in that future scenario. And lastly, as a way to ensure that we're making decisions in a way that will progress mean toward that 2050 vision, we calculated the carbon intensity on the basis of tons of carbon per megawatt hour generated of each portfolio over the 15-year study period. We did receive a comment some time ago suggesting that we add a social cost of carbon in our analysis. And at this point, there's no universally accepted value for the social cost of carbon, and there's kind of a wide range of calculations. So we felt that the carbon tax scenario achieved the same end, but on a more quantitative basis. For the supply side resource analysis, we first conducted the phase 1 evaluation. We started with a list of all possible supply side resources. That's the list shown here on the left-hand side. As a change from the 2017 IRP and as a result of the 2050 vision, we removed all coal options. This is due not only to that need for fuel diversity, but again, that goal of a carbon neutral portfolio and resources that lower the carbon intensity of our portfolio. But a list of all resources isn't necessarily reflective of our mean member priorities. So we sent a survey out to all members asking each member representative to rate a list of criteria on what's the most important considerations to each member as we select future resources. The list of criteria is shown on the right in that chart, along with the results of this survey. Cost was the most important criteria, followed by long-term debt, transmission availability and cost, and local benefit. So then we collected data for each of those resource options relative to each of those criteria. So cost information, performance information, and the data gave a relative score to each resource for each criteria category. Then we weighted each of those categories according to the results of that survey and what was most important to members. So the results are shown here as a sum of all the scores to show which resources best achieve what's most important to mean members. The highest scoring resources from this phase 1 evaluation were entered into the modeling in phase 2. The total list of candidate portfolios that were taken into the modeling in phase 2 is shown on the left. It's reflective of those top scoring resources from phase 1, as well as a few additional resources that we added as a result of discussions at the meetings that Chris referred to and with members. You can read them here, but I'll just run through them really quickly. Portfolio 1 is a natural gas combined cycle unit. Natural gas, although they do emit carbon from the combustion of natural gas, they have an emissions factor about half that of coal units. They're very flexible and responsive to load and have a low capital cost. Portfolio 1A is the same natural gas combined cycle unit, but it adds a carbon capture system, which reduces emissions by about 80%. It increases the cost, of course, but retains the flexibility and dispatchability of that resource. Portfolio 2 is a landfill gas plant. Landfill gas is a very economical resource, pretty low capital costs, maintenance costs, low fuel costs. And because this system utilizes the methane that would otherwise be released into the atmosphere, it actually achieves net negative emissions. For our modeling, however, we conservatively used 0 emissions. Portfolio 3 is a standard municipal solid waste plant. We conservatively used an incinerating plant rather than the pyrolysis system that we looked at a few years ago. Municipal solid waste plants actually have a higher emissions rate than coal, but they're widely considered to be renewable due to the fuel source. Portfolio 4 is a standard onshore wind farm. We used average wind speeds across our region and a combination of developer generation profiles and historical generation data from our own wind farms. Wind is typically inexpensive. We'll discuss the issue of accredited capacity in just a minute, and is obviously carbon-free. Portfolio 5 is a PV solar installation. For this resource, we used some data from the NextEra solar project that we presented in conjunction with the IRP discussions. Solar is higher priced than wind and has a lower capacity factor, but the generation is more coincident with load. Portfolio 6 is a natural gas fuel cell. This actually has characteristics very similar to the combined cycle option, but tends to be more expensive in terms of capital. Fuel cells also can be constructed in a modular configuration, which can allow for better load following. Portfolio 7 is a hydropower plant. The modeling for this option used some of the inputs from our discussions with Central Nebraska Public Power and Irrigation District, which we have also presented within IRP meetings as a potential resource in the future. In addition to this, we also have explored some other potential local hydro units that could have some really good local benefits for our member communities. Portfolio 8 takes the same wind farm from Portfolio 4 and adds a 4-hour battery. Portfolio 9 takes the solar installation from Portfolio 5 and adds a 4-hour battery. And lastly, Portfolio 10 also came out of member discussions at the meetings. We consider here the extension of a PPA for capacity and energy from Cooper Nuclear Station. And it's important to say we haven't had any official offers from NPPD for that contract, but we just wanted to look at it as an option. Now, we all know that if we said we're going to add the same size of each of these resources to create the portfolios, we'd end up with very different resources in terms of energy generation and accredited capacity. So first, what we did was look at the energy needs in each of the regions by year. Using the capacity factor of each type of resource, we calculated the capacity needed for each of those resources to generate the needed energy. And that was the size added for each portfolio. And once again, due to differences in accredited capacity, some of the resources would provide for resource adequacy at the selected size. Like a natural gas plant is fully accredited capacity, gets credit for all of its nameplate capacity. And there are other portfolios that would still require additional capacity. And this is, wind and solar that get a very small fraction of their actual capacity counted toward load. So we use the resources accredited capacity compared to the capacity requirement for peak demand to determine the need for additional capacity. We then assumed that the top priority for this capacity purchase would be member generation. So we used the lease rate for our member generation with an escalator and assumed member gen for our capacity purchase. So the new resource is sized for energy plus the additional capacity required for resource adequacy makes up our modeled resources for each portfolio. Each of the candidate portfolios was entered into the model and run with each of 9 market pricing scenarios that we looked at previously. The purpose of these different pricing scenarios is to measure the risk of each portfolio as energy market conditions change. So here are the summary graphs of the results. On the left is the graph for SPP of the 15-year revenue requirement for the reference case, that scenario 1 for each of the portfolios, which is shown in the dark blue vertical bar. The light blue vertical line shows the variance from the lowest cost scenario to the highest cost scenario. And note that the highest and lowest cost scenarios are not the same for each portfolio. And on the right is a graph showing the same results for the West portfolios. At the April IRP workshop, these results were studied by the Power Supply Committee and many other board members that were in attendance. The consensus aligned with the conclusions in the draft IRP that pointed to wind, solar, hydro, landfill gas, and possibly natural gas for capacity. The Power Supply Committee will make its formal recommendation for the board to approve the report with their recommended portfolios at the May committee and board meetings. The last component of the results that we wanted to look at was the environmental impact. Again, our 2050 vision sets a goal for the resource portfolio to be carbon neutral by 2050. The only way to achieve this is to lower the emissions of our portfolio. Each graph here shows the carbon intensity, or the tons of carbon emitted per megawatt hour of energy generation for each portfolio. The SPP results are on the left and the West results are on the right. The report takes this measure into consideration when spelling out the conclusions of portfolio performance. Some of the comments that have been submitted to MEAN reference the efforts and plans of MidAmerican Energy in relation to renewable energy. MidAmerica is making great strides in terms of renewables as the majority owner and operator of most of the resources in their portfolio, and as an investor-owned utility, MidAmerican has fewer limits in the shaping of their resource portfolio than MEAN has. MidAmerican also acknowledges the importance of maintaining fossil fuel resources in their portfolio to provide reliability while generating from renewable resources. MidAmerican does generate quite a bit of fossil fuel-based energy. Operating in the MISO market means MidAmerican can over-generate in comparison to their load, but still use load as the denominator in the percentage equation. The important reason that MidAmerican must maintain non-renewable generation is the reality of the real-time nature of electric loads. There are plenty of hours that wind facilities generate in excess of demand and plenty of hours that wind facilities generate at levels less than demand. So in aggregate, it would appear that renewables can meet a high percentage of demand, but this ignores those hours that wind doesn't meet load and another resource is needed. The integrated markets make this possible. But the good news is that MidAmerican's decarbonization will directly impact MEAN's ability to decarbonize as well. MidAmerican is the majority owner and operator of the Walter Scott Energy Center and the Loiasa Generating Station, both located in Iowa. These two resources make up a large portion of MEAN's portfolio and actually represent all of MEAN's coal resources in MISO. When MidAmerican makes the decision to retire these resources, Mean will be able to procure non-carbon resources to replace the capacity and energy that we now receive from these resources. This will significantly increase the non-carbon generation in our portfolio. There have been some questions as to the opportunities for public participation in Mean's IRP process, and Chris touched on this quite a bit earlier here. On this slide, and detailed in Appendix A of the IRP document, is a list of all the public meetings Mean has held during which data on the IRP was presented and discussed and feedback solicited from membership. Each of these public meetings was publicly noticed. The agenda for each of these meetings, listing the IRP as an agenda item, was published in advance. Several of these meetings had a virtual attendance option, and several of these meetings listed an alternate attendance location if interested members of the public were unable to attend in person at the Kearney or Lincoln, Nebraska meeting sites. If anyone would like additional information on these meetings, please let me know. As I said, Appendix A of the report includes the meeting information from those relevant meetings. For every process within the IRP and for every input and every decision point, Mean has presented information, had discussions with the board members, and asked for feedback at least one of these public meetings, more often at multiple meetings. If anyone wants to run through any of those meetings and that material, I certainly can. I do want to reiterate here, and Chris touched on this as well, that Mean staff does not make resource acquisition decisions. We don't have a vote. We do the analysis and deliver it to committees and the board for their use in decision making. So far, all of the decisions have been publicly discussed and have had a public input component. We're very proud of the work that our committee and board members have done to date and the collaborative process that has resulted in this IRP draft. If there are any questions, we can take them now, or you can communicate any thoughts that come to you later with Chris, and we can work with him to get you any answers.
So I would open it up for questions. If you do have a question, please approach the podium, state your name.
I've got a question on the.
Could you come to the podium, Bill? That way we can hear you.
I've got a question, I guess, for Shannon on, well, I don't know if you had that chart or not. She didn't present that chart, but
Is it in the IRP report itself?
yeah, it's in the
Do you know what
Looking
page
for
you're referencing by chance?
page 14, I think it was. Yeah. It's showing coal still generating 50% of your load in 2038. And you're saying that Walter Scott and stuff is Mid-American. And there's talk of Mid-American shutting that plant down by 2035. So I guess I don't see you planning for that.
They have not communicated to that to us at all.
And they're also claiming that they presented, or 88% of their power was produced by renewable energy last year.
Yes. Yep, our contract with Mid-America for Walter Scott Energy Center is for the life of the plant. They have not communicated any closure plans or retirement plans to us. As soon as they do, we will certainly, we would be very happy to incorporate that into our resource planning.
Yeah, I guess, my question is why don't we have an interim plan, which when the members requested one?
That is an excellent question. We did survey the membership, and 65% of them said that they are in favor of having an interim goal in 2035. We have near-term needs in 2023 and 2024 for new resources. And we thought it was prudent to wait until after we had contracted those resources and we know what we definitely will have into the future to set those interim goals. That is definitely a topic for discussion in our upcoming power supply meetings.
Yeah, but the public's not going to have an input on this resource plan if you don't have an interim plan in it. And the members thought by 2035, you ought to be 61% carbon neutral, the average of the input from the members. I mean, the board not listening to the members or what?
The board is the members. First of all, that's a very important clarification. And that survey does show an average of 61%, and we're now at 50. Once we are planning to procure a resource in the 2023-24 timeframe, which will tell us what that number is more likely to be as we get further into the future. Again, the discussion of available energy versus dispatched energy will definitely change into the future, and certainly by the year 2035, we'll have a much better idea. Once we know what that 2023-24 resource is, we will know what that projected energy is, and we'll know what we need to do by 2035 to set that goal. We have not set that goal, and the members, the board, have not set that goal as an official policy.
Shannon, you talked a little bit about contracting and what those contracts will look like, mentioning that 23-24 will be entering into some. What is the typical contract duration, and what are the highs and lows that we're looking at? Is this specifically a 10-year, 15-year, 20-year? I think that kind of goes to scale of decision making. What are those contracts that we're entertaining?
That's a great question, Chris. Typically, we see between 15 and 25-year deals. Our board has shown a preference for power purchase agreements rather than future ownership agreements for several of the reasons that I've talked about here in this presentation. And like I said, typically, in order to get investments back, developers want between a 15 and 25-year term.
Yeah, I guess I don't argue with that, but I would think you'd be a little more aggressive with your renewable energy sources. It looks like to me you're projecting out 2038 still, the majority of your production is going to be coal.
Right, and that again goes back to those long-term contracts. There are contracts that we cannot end because we are minority owners in those resources. If Mid-America closes Walter Scott, that will open up a very large portion for us to increase our renewables or our non-carbon energy, and we definitely will be planning for that if we see that. But so far, as I said, we have not been communicated that at all. And it goes back to that limitation of we have these resources, and in order to get out of those resources, we would see enormous costs for all of our members.
Well, so how long does your contract run with Mid-America currently?
For the life of the plant.
So that's a variable time span then.
Yeah, yes, it is.
So you don't really know how long that contract is.
This is Tim Turbany with me, and I apologize, my name's not on the screen. I used Shannon's link to join, but I could weigh in on that a little bit as well. So we do attend twice a year. We go to Walter Scott and Deloitte Generating Station. We meet with Mid-America staff to discuss the future of the facilities and the maintenance operations of those. And I would agree with Shannon that we have not been given any indication of a projected close date for those facilities, but I would echo that what she has mentioned, that we are tied to those facilities for the life of those contracts, life of those facilities. But we would certainly, entertain options once we know what those closing dates will be. And you'll see in the report that Shannon's very adamant about using known data rather than any kind of projections or guesses, because we just can't plan our portfolio on things that we don't know factually.
Yeah, I guess, as far as Mid-American and their coal plants, there's a study that just recently come out that says all their coal plants could be reduced or shut down by 2035 and save their ratepayers $1.2 billion. So.
Yes, sir. And if that would occur, that we would definitely be looking at other options at that point once they would make that decision.
So I guess this resource plan is just kind of a guess. Is that right?
Well, it's based, as Shannon's mentioned, it's based on factual information, contracts, and information that we know to be certain, rather than, again, we can't make any projections on the closure of those facilities until we have got that information from the majority owners.
I guess I don't have too many more questions specifically about that, so.
Well, thank you. Chris, do you have any final thoughts before we close the topic?
No, I mean, just, yeah, having participated in most, if not all of those meetings, not necessarily as a committee member, but usually there before or after the finance committee. So I'm there to see what was involved. And Shannon did a great job of capturing 2 years worth of discussions. And I think some of those charts and the regressions and the math and data behind there are, an astronomical amount of work. And, she put them up on 2 charts. And I think, she does a fabulous job, and that, in some cases, an oversimplification of, what she's doing and what she's looking at. But
Is this something that after the 23-24 discussions, we could potentially have this conversation again to give an update? So we can kind of keep in the loop with the progress of how the contracts are nearing end, or what notifications we're getting, so we can think about that interim conversation.
this is a once every 5 years
That's the problem.
plan. So
You won't see another one for 5 years.
But she did say that there were some decisions to be made in the 23-24 sessions. So
Yes, all of those resource decisions will go to the board. And there will be a lot of analysis presented, numbers presented along the way. We do present load and capability twice a year to the board. We constantly, probably every single board meeting, are bringing some kind of, resource presentation to the board. So we do keep up to date. Anytime your council or board of trustees would like us to make a presentation on an update, we are more than happy to come there and speak to any of these topics that you would like.
great, Shannon, that would be helpful, I think, as we make progress down the road to have these ongoing conversations.
I might add, the Power Supply Committee won't present its report until after public comments close, and it'll be in the final report, and there'll be no available public comment on it. Why is that?
The report does contain the conclusions of the analysis, which point to the highest scoring of those portfolios. During the workshop discussion, the Power Supply Committee reviewed all of the information and had discussions about their likely recommendation. They did agree with all of those conclusions and are likely to recommend those same portfolios that were the highest scoring that are shown in that conclusion section.
But we won't know until after the final report's done, and we won't have an option to make any comment.
Right, that is a Power Supply Committee function. They make the recommendation.
I guess that's all I've got, so.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Shannon and Tim, for presenting tonight. We do appreciate the information. It's been very helpful to help walk through that. And
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before we go on, so Chris shared, and I didn't see this last week, but there was a editorial published in the Independent Advocate from some organization out of Colorado that I've never heard of. And it sounded like it contained some inaccurate factual information. I just think it'd be appropriate to bring that to light here.
I didn't see the editorial. Chris, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I think there's a SDSG, Sustainable Development, something or other group out of Gunnison, Colorado, has attended at least the last meeting and had some comments about what that integrated resource plans or some deficiencies that they see in that. They published they submitted an op-ed to the Indianola Independent Advocate.
Do you know if the same op-ed was submitted to various communities, or was it just targeted toward Indianola?
It looks like
I think probably members of
Member
me, I
communities?
would guess,
Okay.
the communities, if I was guessing.
it looks like it was submitted to everyone, not every newspaper picked it up. And the Independent Advocate did publish that op-ed, and Mean has gone through and did have some comments, about some of the statements in particular. And they are going to be responding to that public comment with their own.
To the advocate.
Yeah, to the advocate, and I do hope that does get picked up by the advocate, because I think there's a lot of important facts or decisions or
Information.
implications of the information contained in there that, are kind of used and abused a little bit. And Mean has gone through and kind of clarified and pointed out some of the deficiencies in their reasoning. And so I think, I don't know that necessarily Shannon is aware of that, but Shannon or Tim, if you have any thoughts on that.
And I'll just add before they jump in, I felt like Shannon addressed a lot of those issues in her comments already.
That were brought up in that.
Yeah.
Shannon or Tim, are you aware of this op-ed?
Yes, I did see it, and I've also seen the response that we prepared to submit to the newspaper. And Chris is exactly right. There are some slight misrepresentations, if I may, that we will hopefully clarify in our response.
Thank you for bringing that up. Any other comments, points before we let Tim and Shannon go?
Miley Solheim.
I guess maybe I ought to address why we're here, why we're here. Bill Howard's my name, by the way. I'm on the Sustainability Committee. We went to the city council last week and showed them a statement that we'd like to make in response to this resource plan. And I think maybe there was a little misunderstanding that we were trying to critique the IMU board and employees, and that's not what we intended to do at all. It's in response to this resource plan that we just discussed. And I don't know if any of you read the statement that we prepared. We tried to get it.
Did you bring it?
I've got a copy of it here.
It was supposed to be submitted to you prior to the meeting.
Yeah, it didn't make our publishing deadline, so I didn't include that in our packet.
I thought
But I
you're
do
gonna
have
email it to the board members.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't follow up with Chris on Friday to hear if he wanted me to send it out or not. So I apologize for that.
So the report that or the response you're asking us to read, does it change with any of the information that you heard tonight?
I don't think so, no. It actually asks or addresses a lot of the questions that I asked Shannon. So I mean, I can read it if you want me to read it.
Is it just the half a page?
It's about 3/4 of the page.
Go ahead.
Like the highlights?
In our review of the draft 2022 integrated resource plan, we find your continued reliance on fossil fuel generation for the majority of your energy supply extremely disappointing. We find it discouraging you're planning 50% of your generation in 2038 to still be from coal. The recently report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that fossil fuel emissions need to be reduced by 45% by 2030. Your draft of the plan only reduces emissions by 5% in 2029 and remains the same in 2038. We applaud the goal of being carbon neutral by 2050. The report states, as part of the January 2021 renewable survey, the members were asked whether Mean should consider establishing an inner goal for carbon-free percentage in our portfolio. Of the respondents, 65% answered in favor of an interim goal. However, there was no mention of an interim goal in the draft report. We can't see how you can meet the goal of being carbon neutral by 2050 when you're using the same amount of coal through 2038. As a lot has changed in the last 5 years, but we'd like to see the swifter progress toward a serious reduction in fossil fuel use. We understand Mid-American is a private company, but they're far ahead in this process. In 2021, an estimated 88% of the energy Iowa customers use over the course came from renewable resources. So it's certainly feasible to decrease our reliance on coal. The good news for reliable energy is that once the investment is made, the fuel is free. When surveyed, members chose low cost as the most important consideration. In
in the draft report, it states that the levelized cost of energy in dollars per megawatt hour is $83 for coal, $67 using community solar, and $45 using solar with storage capacity. When you look at the fuel costs, the cost for using coal is $30 per megawatt hour and $0 for wind and solar. Several of the portfolios show progress away from fossil fuels, and we encourage you to move in that direction as much and as fast as possible. However, we are disappointed to see the Power Supply Committee recommendation will not be reviewed until after the final report. This leaves us unable to comment. We encourage you to review this plan and reduce the reliance on fossil fuels and move into the future with a greater percentage of renewable energy sources. That's the statement. So that's the city council kind of wanted to come before you and see what you thought about it. But as a sustainability committee, we think that's a responsible statement to make in response to the resource plan.
Two things that come to mind that I don't know that we fully understand or we want to hear. But as far as the coal production that's out there, those are lifetime contracts that mean signed that they cannot get out.
I'm aware of that.
Nope. So hear me. So that being said, as I thought rather well said, our only choice as far as getting into these new renewables, which I think we are in favor of, but the bottom line is we've got long-term contracts here that we have to abide by. So until those plants are shut down or something else happened, we have no choice but to abide by those, whether we like it or not. So,
Which likely extend to 2038 or even beyond.
Yeah, well, I guess I don't know that I'm arguing that, but I wish they'd make more emphasis on trying to shut the plants down.
well, that's not our call.
No, I know what I'm saying.
Because here's what I'm going to tell you. If what you're telling me is true, and I'm not saying it's not, okay, but if you're telling me that this sustainable energy is super cheap, that when these plants do shut down, that's what they're going to do, because they've already said cost is the most important thing. So that being said, they're going to take a look at these other alternatives and say, okay, let's move to solar, or let's move to wind, or whatever that is. But we're kind of over a barrel until those, and I don't want to be critical necessarily of Mean, because at the time when they signed those contracts, who knows when that was. I mean, that's no different than IMU. I heard something at a council meeting the other night where a member had said something about IMU being dissatisfied with Mean, blah, blah, blah. In the time that I've been on this board, I would tell you, I'm actually quite happy with Mean and the way they responded and trying to be proactive in regards to our rates. As we look at things across the country, there are places out there that got it a heck of a lot worse than we do. And when our board at that time made that commitment to be on Mean, I'm sure with the information that they had, any one of us here probably would have made the same decision. And so from that standpoint, we're being harsh to people that aren't here anymore. And we don't understand really what they were going through at that point in time. The bottom line is Mean has long-term contracts on these coal plants. And until those babies are shut down, our hands are somewhat tied. I shouldn't say somewhat tied. Our hands are tied.
Yeah, well,
we might not like it.
I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying, Mike, but I think we still, as a same sustainability committee, we ought to be able to make this statement.
I don't care what statement you make, quite honestly. I really don't.
I guess that's what I'm presenting to you. So
if we do submit this statement, what's the protocol around it? Does it need to be submitted by a certain time?
Well, yeah, we've got till the 15th of this month, I think, something like that.
And who do we direct that to?
Not we.
We'll direct it to me.
This is a city, I'm Anita Christensen, I'm a member of the Sustainability Committee. This is a comment we'd like to make on behalf of ourselves. It's not the city, it's not IMU. We want to make it on behalf of ourselves, and we understand there's other things going on, but we feel this is what we would like to see if it was our choice.
So it's not reflecting on you in any way. It's not reflecting on the city in any way. And the city made it clear that it's our committee making that comment. It's due by 5 PM on May 14th.
And you will do that. You will take care of
Yes,
that.
we will submit that comment on
Yeah.
behalf of.
And I'm sorry, who did you say you submit that to?
Me,
To me,
To me.
Yes.
yeah, in response to the resource plan.
And I think one thing I feel like I need to say is public comment is for public comment. I mean, we're not there to be cheerleaders. It's for public comment. We can say good things and we can say negative things. That's the point of public comment. So we just want to say, this is what we feel we would like to see. Maybe their hands are tied. We understand that, but I don't think public comment is meant just for positive things. It's meant, we'd like to see other options, and that's what we'd like to say.
I'd say if you have your draft and you're sending it on behalf of your committee, not attached to the city or IMU.
Yeah.
say-
I might address what Mike's saying about cost getting cheaper. I just read an article where the Energy Information Administration, which is a government agency, the current average kilowatt hour price is 14 cents. And they expect it to go up to 15 next year. And they're saying with renewable energy coming on, they expect the cost to drop to 10.5 kilowatt hour by 2030.
I hope it does.
That's what they're expecting with.
I hope it does. The other thing is, we also don't know what's gonna happen down the road 25 or 30 years from now. What new technologies come down the road by then that we don't even know about
Yeah,
today.
but they're expecting the average kilowatt hour rate to drop that much in 8 years. So, I mean, that's encouraging if their forecast is accurate. So,
And we're sitting at, what'd you say, 12.1 now?
Our retail rate that we just passed for
Yeah.
our summer rate.
yeah, no, we've got a reasonable rate. I don't think anybody's arguing that. We know you had to raise it, which makes sense. Natural gas has only gone up 2 or 3 times in the last 2 or 3 years, so.
Okay, well, I'm gonna move us along. Thank you very
Yeah.
much for your comments
Thanks,
and for
Anita.
your
Thanks, Bill.
passion.
Yeah,
We will move on to the next agenda topic. Water utility action items.
Yes, it's about a mile and a half away from our nearest water main, another property that would like to have, and rural water runs right in through the front yard, so staff recommendation is,
Okay, so do we have a motion for the authorization of Warren Water District to serve a customer within their territory upon proper notice to IMU, since the customer is 2 miles of the IMU, within 2 miles of the IMU territory?
Question now, is that down in 15th or is that down on?
yes, down on 15th, you go to.
When I was looking at the map here, I was a little confused by it.
Yeah, Plainview is that closest one, and so coming out, it's just, yeah, we'd have to buy it back, those 3 people.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion approved. Any other utility or water items?
We've had some luck. We got about $37,000 worth of parts in for our filter actuators that were 25 years old. So the guys have been working that, and for our lime slaker parts for that, which we've been waiting on for quite a while. So we're hoping that was one project, didn't happen for us, but otherwise been staying busy with that. And we just got people are opening up. We got 21 parkings that we need to repair from our water main breaks. So we got the streets done. Now we're going to work on the parkings and get them done. So that's next on the hit list.
So the parts that we got, does that make us whole?
That makes us better. They're not 25 years old anymore, and in the capitals, Mike, we did set up because we know we've got to do it, so much a year for each part of the.
I just didn't know if we had more stuff that was still coming in that isn't here yet.
Yes, that we
Yeah.
do. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And we will, I think the next 5 years, I've got it scheduled out for different parts of the operation that we're going to have to upgrade that haven't been touched since 97 when the plant was put in. So those parts are 96 or 97 when they were built. So we've done real good with them. We just gotta they had to be proactive instead of reactive.
Good job on you on that.
That's all I've got.
Any other things for Christie on that? What? Okay. Communications utility information items.
I think Mike might have a couple electric items. too.
Oh, did I run by it?
So I always like to be last. So.
Sorry, I didn't mean to scoot over you.
That's all right. No problem. Yeah, just some things we got, just like I say, construction season that's definitely in full swing right now. Digger truck was on our capital budget. We talked about that. So back in January, when we spoke to the vendors about like lead time on that, they were at 26 months. Last week, we got word for 4 years out.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
4
So,
years.
I mean, I
Holy cow.
need to say I will not be bringing you bigger truck bid specs or anything anytime soon. We're gonna have to reevaluate and see what we're gonna do, what our other options are. I don't know how you project that out, what the cost of that vehicle would be 4 years from now.
Yeah, nobody's gonna commit to that 4 years out.
Yeah.
So
Are there opportunities to buy used?
used market is really tough right now because of that lead time. Everybody's buying used stuff. To be honest, what I'm really thinking about doing is reaching out to, and I don't know who those specific people would be or vendors would be, is to send that truck off, tell them to take it apart.
Can we rebuild it?
Rebuild it, put
Yeah.
it back together. That's gonna be my option. I don't know what that's cost gonna be, the length of time or when you get it in there, but that's definitely gonna be an option. to take a look at.
Next thing will be availability of those parts.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we've definitely seen that. So another thing, our turbines were on standby this week with the increased heat. And I know we've had some wind lately, but there's probably not a lot of wind tomorrow. So definitely we're on standby right now to generate possibly. And then diesel fuel, I wanted to speak about that just a little bit. We've got 70,000 in the capital budget to buy a few every year to replace our general runs. I don't need a vote or anything, just kind of nod if you're good with this, but my proposal with fuel costs going up would be, we do a budget amendment, and we push that back into next year, we buy $140,000 next year. And hopes, I don't know if it'll come back down, but I don't know that it's, right now, it's just continually go up right now.
And you
So
have plenty to
have
get.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Have you not spent any on that this year?
No, we were hoping usually over the winter months is usually,
That's
that's winter. First, we typically been at great luck in buying fuel, and we get that time, we're all sitting down to $5 a gallon. Continue to go up. So.
And you
And-
have
and-
reserves to get you through.
So we've got enough, I think, yes, by, and I mean, can we go by it? We can. It just goes into the average tank cost. So when when we do generate, mean pays us for the average cost in that tank, but ultimately that's our money as well. And then that we're paying for. So anytime we buy it cheaper, better on.
What is our current average is
I have-
substantially
Oh,
below
yeah.
market. I mean, I think our average 225
Two sides in the low two.
in the low twos. So we'd be paying $5 and only getting reimbursed $225.
Well, but I don't know if it's gonna get any better, Mike, and
I
that's,
don't know. I know.
that's it. You got to get your crystal ball
Yep.
on. Well, this part of this is your budget.
It is.
You
Not
guys
mine,
to
but
figure
I
it
just
out.
got, if we would on it the next year, that would be the reason why. And it's a crystal ball. We've been on the other end. If we were to jump on it here 2 years ago, borrowed at $1.03 or whatever it was. I don't think we'll ever get back down.
Should have bought more of them.
I think we bought all we could.
We did, because we had the tank inspections coming
Yeah.
up. We can only put so much in there, but yeah, otherwise we would have lost a lot more time.
So my only concern then would be just to make sure that we have sufficient supplies on hand, that we don't get ourselves in trouble.
Right, I think we've got enough right now to get us through at least the summer season. So to generate, right now, we just ran last week, and so the next time we'll have to generate is for our capacity test in July, where we have to prove that we can generate 2 hours on each unit.
What if Mean gets a hold of us and says it makes some power?
So we'll make it. We'll start them up and away we go.
Well, you might have to buy
But we may have to, yeah, if they call us up, we're gonna be forced to, at some point, that we may have to buy. And at that point, we're getting reimbursed for the fuel, and just turn around, and take that money like we normally do. And we just turn around and put it right back into the tank. Other than that, that's all I have.
Yeah, we wouldn't, we would be getting reimbursed that $2.25 or that low $2. So we wouldn't see the full $5 impact. So to that end, it's not in our best financial interest.
Has there been any discussion about raising that return rate?
Based on our costs.
Yeah, so everyone's fuel reimbursement. So we get paid some capacity payments, and traditionally IMU has got paid less than some of the smaller markets. There was at one point it was $1.25 or $1.50 where everyone else was getting $2. Over the past couple of years or past 3 years, we have been raised up to parity with everyone. So for our full $2 month megawatt production capability, we're getting paid those capacity payments. But the fuel reimbursement, is a second part of that. They reimburse for fuel, but it's always everyone's average cost. Fortunately, we've made some good financial fuel guesses that have pushed that average cost down. But that also means we get reimbursed less. It's just.
I'd say you haven't had enough from you. Did you get what you needed by? Sorry to say that. Kurt, how about your communication?
Yep. April was busy and hey, it's gonna be even busier yet. So we've already got 82 installs on the books for May. So things aren't.
Already?
Already. Yeah, they're mega booked. So.
Still running half and half new.
Yep, that works out. So the last 3 months, we've averaged 42 new installs. So
What's our lead time that Kurt?
So out about 3.5 weeks right now. We're trying to get that switch.
This is
back
my
in.
frown face.
Yeah, Springtime with drops.
Do that again.
Springtime drops and we've just been short staffed. I've had illness and we've had people out on vacation and stuff. So I'm hoping to have a full staff back by the end of this week, but it's been about 3 weeks since we've had everybody there. So yeah, we will definitely work on getting that better. Other than that, state of Iowa has their grant stuff up on the website finally included. So we'll be working on some Alpha 7 engineering stuff that we'll be bringing to the next week.
Kurt, there was a news today about this $30. Have we looked into that at all to see?
Yeah, we've looked into it. Yeah,
So there's something the Biden administration came out with where they're going to give for a certain income level. I think it was 200% of poverty level or something to that extent. And I don't know what that is. That they can qualify for a $30 reimbursement, I'm going to call it, per month, as I understand it, to go towards internet.
Their fiber cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, 200% of the poverty level. So for a household of 4, that is around $5K in Iowa, $5,000. So there are some options to do that. There is a lot of reporting on the back end. None of the utilities have jumped on that yet, other than I believe Muscatine went that direction and decided to take a look at that. But something we can definitely take a look at in the future. Some companies are lowering their base rate to $30 to make that a zero cost. Others are raising their speeds up and then just giving a $30 discount. So
what kind of administration?
there's a lot of administration on it. And the last IAMU broadband meeting we went to, those few people that were doing it were having a difficult time getting reimbursed in a timely manner. That's really my big concern on it right now. So, but as the program gets put in and they get the kinks worked out of it,
And then there's something.
Federal. No, so the news today was that there's 20 companies, 18, the big boys that have all signed on to this and say that they're going to offer a $30 product to these folks.
Where are they?
Where, yes. Yes.
Yeah. So, and they're going to promise 100 meg speed too as well. Again, where are they?
Up to 100 meg speed was what I saw. Yeah.
So that
So-
means they've got to fulfill their broadband plan to those areas?
I think that we're available is going to give them an out that they can't actually provide speed to those areas.
So they're banking on it,
So.
basically. Right.
It's just something to keep an eye on.
Chris, combined electric water communication action items.
This week, have a couple more related committee meetings that'll lead up into next month. We're having the board of directors meetings. One of those will be discussing that IRP. I'll be attending for the finance committee, and certainly some of these costs and portfolios will be discussed in a little more detail. I don't think there'll be any surprises out of it. Shannon kind of touched a lot of the finance and financial related components of the IRP. So that is our, that's probably a big hurdle for the week. And then leading into the full board of directors meeting.
So will it be at that board of directors meeting that the IRP is approved and then submitted?
Yeah, it'll be, so these committee meetings are again more informational gathering, and it'll be next month. I think May 18th and 19th, they'll be in Kearney for those board of directors meetings, and that'll be the ones where the IRP is approved.
We also have the RFP or the approval of the engagement letter with Dickinson.
Yep, in your packet is an engagement letter for consideration. So coming out of the feedback from our last meeting where you guys had indicated a preference for switching to Dickinson, they have provided their engagement letter. It is pretty standard and boilerplate. We didn't have the attorneys review that, but this is consistent with our other agreement.
So any questions or conversation before we move to approve it?
Move to approve.
Second.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Take
All
your
in
second.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Dickinson is confirmed.
And so then they're immediately, since we've approved them, they will immediately.
Yeah, we'll, once we sign this one, effective tomorrow, we'll wrap up all our existing, get that information transfer finalized now that's been approved. We'll make that final steps and bringing them up to speed on all of our current legal.
Did we
involvement.
have anything that was in flight that we would have Rich Country finish for us?
I don't think there's anything that needs to be completed. Certainly, Rich Entry started the solar contract review. Dickinson is aware of that, and they've been just kind of have some background conversations with that. There's a couple of other items of that kind of substance that are have been ongoing legal issues or legal developments. We will get that final information transferred from our old firm to Dickinson. Again, just waiting for the formal action to make them aware of all of those.
We did think it might be good if Brian could join us in our next meeting just to introduce himself.
Yep, he is planning on attending, and they did indicated, I think on a reoccurring basis, availability preference is Zoom, but for the next meeting, they indicated they'll be here in person.
Great.
Just to see everyone's face and get a little bit of familiarity.
Good. Any other business?
Is there an update on solar? What's the status of that?
Still
Wait for attorneys.
Still waiting for attorneys. I think, kind of been backburnered. We're the last group to fall. Our schedules for install have been pushed back enough that both our attorney groups don't feel like it's a pressing need. So I don't think it's, I haven't been happy with the speed at which it's progressed. I don't think Rocky has either.
Do we need to start making some noise on that?
What happened in January?
Well, and that was
Nebraska and Colorado's lawyers. Like a month ago.
you'd think if they got all these other places in place already, that this ought to be boilerplate stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rocky, in speaking with Blue Sky, he.
That's part of the problem right there, the name.
He kind of indicated they really need to sit down for 3 hours, but they're scheduling meetings for 45 minutes and assigning homework, and not everyone's doing both sides of the homework, and so their next meeting is not productive, and it's.
Can you share some urgency that you're getting from the board to move that along?
I will.
If everybody's supporting
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
Maybe
Oh.
engage the Dickinson firm to help us do that.
Yeah, and I think now we have that opportunity to get them working with or to or in concert with the Waverly attorneys. So it's tough
Is it
to.
just us and Waverly? Is that who we're talking about that are in this group?
They're Sergeant Bluff, I think, for
So there's three of us.
yeah. So there's 3 of us, and all kind of have gave input, and Waverly's taking lead, and so it's tough for me to push somebody else's attorney.
Is Carlisle, are they still potential?
They still have indicated they have some desire. I don't know that they're gonna make some deadlines. So that they're not in these discussions per se right now. We haven't really, we've talked about the possibilities of where they might co-locate some facilities, just for everyone's background, but
And you think they understand that timeline and deadlines and?
yeah, and I think that's where the last conversation I had with Carlisle is, can this still be an opportunity for a standalone project? Because it sounds like maybe they weren't ready to make that decision yet.
They want to do it later, still potentially with us, but do it as an add-on later.
Yeah, because they're probably not going to be ready, with the deadline being any day now. They're not ready to make that decision quite yet.
Lou, would you be sure to share thoughts and prayers with the Dittmer family? I know
Yes, I will.
it's a very tough time right now, so thank you.
I was thinking the other day, and this is a weird thing, but as someone who lives on a gravel road and power washed his deck this weekend, our water plant, where we're looking at putting these solar panels, what about dust from that road? Is that anything we need to be concerned about?
It's in the city capital project to pave it.
That's part of the pave?
That's part of, not this next year, it's Hillcrest Avenue, and then the year after that, it's proposed to pave South
Okay.
Cape.
All the way to the bridge, or how far they go?
All the way to 17th Street up there, or would be Larrabee Street if you're going county address, but 17th Street, city address. Right there past the plant where it curves around by the dog
Maybe they'll
park.
hire you to power.
No, but I thought about it because I thought, holy smokes, with all that dust settling in on those things.
So part of the, hopefully no one give away too much, part of the calculation to get that 5% was involving a layer of dust coverage. And so, our 5% cap is including some dust penalty out of our production. If that does get paved and that dust doesn't get penalized, or dust doesn't accumulate, we might end up with.
It was just a goofy thought I had.
Okay, any other business topics? Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is closed. Thank you, everybody.